Back in 1921 in Rio Gallegos, Santa Cruz, Argentina, something happened that would change everything. It began as a quiet struggle for dignity on the wind-swept sheep ranches of Argentine Patagonia. Immigrant laborers, Spanish, Italian, Russian, organizing for wages, food, and safe working conditions. They belonged to the FORA, the anarcho-syndicalist federation that had spread through ports and estancias after World War I. In the autumn of 1920 and into 1921, strikes erupted across the vast estancias of Santa Cruz. The ranchers, whose flocks fed European markets, saw only threat, lost profits, scattered orders, a challenge to their absolute control over land and life. Tension hardened into conspiracy. Local estancieros, influential in Buenos Aires banking circles, and linked to foreign buyers, coordinated to break the strikes. They pressured provincial authorities, and then the national government. President Hipólito Yrigoyen's administration, wary of unrest and anxious to protect exports, authorized a military intervention. Into this breach stepped Lieutenant Colonel Héctor Varela, a soldier tasked with restoring order. Varela's campaign was swift and ruthless. What the official dispatches called pacification looked more like calculated reprisal. Troops hunted groups of striking workers across freezing plains and isolated camps. Captured men were tried in makeshift courts that lasted minutes. Sentences were execution by firing squad. Orders, witnesses later said, emphasized deterrence. Kill leaders, dismantle the unions, make an example. The scale of the violence remains contested. Eyewitness testimony collected decades later, and the painstaking research of historians like Osvaldo Bayer revealed mass executions, clandestine burials, and a pattern of collusion between military officers, provincial politicians, and ranching elites. Conservative newspapers at the time echoed the ranchers' frame, labeling strikers as red agitators and justifying harsh measures. The conspiracy was not a shadowy cabal, but an open alignment. Economic power, political authority, and military force acting in concert to preserve a social order built on land concentration and cheap labor. Stories from survivors are stark. Men dragged from hovels, tied, and led to shallow graves. Entire crews disappeared from camps after a night of transfers. In some places, troops promised mercy and then executed prisoners in the dawn chill. Local priests and doctors, fearing reprisals, kept only whispered records. The immediate official count minimized deaths. Later investigators, and those who gathered testimony years after, suggested that the toll could range from several hundred to well over 1,000. Numbers that muffle the human detail but signal the scale of state violence. The implications rippled beyond Patagonia. The repression broke the immediate power of rural unions, but also seared a new narrative into Argentine politics, that the state could be used to defend concentrated economic interests against its own citizens. For decades, the official story framed Varela as restoring order. For many families in Patagonia, it became a story of betrayal, of soldiers and judges who answered to landowners rather than to law. The conspiracy's unraveling came slowly. Whistleblowers, exile testimony, and later journalistic and historical inquiry exposed the mechanisms of collusion. Osvaldo Bayer's 1972 book La Patagonia rebelled resurrected testimonies, naming names and reconstructing events from interviews and archives. The moral shock of those accounts forced Argentina to confront a darker version of its early 20th century development, one in which state formation and economic expansion were stained by mass repression. Today, the wind still carries a memory across the steppes. Graves have been exhumed, plaques erected, and the phrase Patagonia rebelled enters classrooms as both warning and history. The crime was not a lone murder or a blind slaughter. It was a political decision, a conspiracy of interest that chose violence over negotiation. In the empty estancias and the creaking corrals, you can still feel the echo of that choice. A reminder that when power, profit, and arms conspire, the smallest act of protest can cost many lives.